Right. Thank you, Laska Hirlach, and thank you, Minister. Minister, last Tuesday, the Taoiseach Leo Varadkar said he hoped the government could extend the renters' tax rebate to parents to help their children with rent while they are studying. He added that the Minister for Finance was examining ways that this could be done. Could you provide us with an update on your work in this area? Thank you.
Thanks very much, Caoirleach, and thank Deputy Conway-Walsh for the important and timely question, because of course when the question was submitted and we were preparing our answer, it was in advance of the finance bill being published, but the finance bill will be published later this week. But the Minister for Finance has indicated today, as have I, that parents who pay the rent for their students will now be covered by the rent relief. So if I look at the students and the various scenarios in which students may rent, you have obviously a student who rents privately, registers with the Residential Tenancies Board and pays the rent. They're obviously covered as any renter would be in the general population. You have a student who avails of the rent-a-room scheme. The Minister for Finance has been clear they're covered. You have students who live in on-campus accommodation and often have a licence agreement rather than a tenancy agreement. They will be covered. And then fourthly, the category where a student is renting privately, but their mum or their dad, their parent is paying the rent. The finance bill will now ensure, quite rightly, that parent can avail of the rent relief. So I think this is an area in which I think we agree on. I think it is right and proper that is done, and I very much welcome the work of my colleague, the Minister for Finance, Paschal Donoghue, in relation to this.
That move. This was absolutely necessary. We should never have put students in that situation in the first place where they were going to be excluded. Can you confirm the situation in regard to PhD renters and if they have been included? Because students and PhD researchers need action specifically like everybody else. So, Minister, are there any my question to you, follow-up is, are there any section of students who are paying out money for rent who will be excluded from this, or is everybody included? Thank you.
Well, I can only tell the Deputy those who are included, because I'm trying to think of various scenarios here. But I am satisfied that the way the finance bill is now drafted will provide access to the rent relief tax credit for students in the four scenarios that I outlined there: those living in on-campus accommodation, those renting themselves, those in the rent-a-room scheme, and those renting where the tenancy is registered with the Residential Tenancies Board, but their parents may be paying the rent for them, which I'd imagine is it may be a scenario for many families across the country. In relation to the issue of PhD students here, my understanding is that this issue relates to the fact that the stipend is not taxed, and this is a tax credit. Now again, it's not possible for me on the floor of the Dáil to imagine all the various scenarios of individual PhD students. Some who'll work, some will have an income that is taxable, but it is a tax credit and it is linked. It is obviously linked, it is administered by revenue and linked to whether or not you are paying tax. So it is a tax credit. I'll come back in a moment, sorry, time.
Yeah, can I ask you to look at that situation in terms of PhD researchers, because you will know the inequity that's built in already to them not getting the stipend that they should be getting, well, not being treated as workers, indeed, as they should. I think it highlights that fact of why they may be excluded in this situation. So hopefully there will be a way found to include them. Obviously, it's just €500, and in the context of things, and in the context of rural-proofing our policies and students from rural areas having to find accommodation and pay for accommodation, it is just a tiny bit of what we need to do. I'm sure in the other questions that we have here tonight, we will tease out the whole area of student accommodation and what needs to be done in order to give certainty to students. I'm really concerned, Minister, that there are students now thinking of dropping out because they have been couch surfing and they have been in accommodation that's not conducive to them participating fully in their studies, and now their parents are trying to ensure that they stay on at college. It really does concern me.
It's just a couple of bits, and some of this we'll be able to come back to, as the Deputy suggests, in later questions. I mean, the first thing is I do think we need to do a full, proper external review of PhD supports in this country, and I expect to be in a position, Deputy, to announce the details of that this week. I think we need to look at it root and branch, all elements of supports, what other countries do, what we do well, what we must do better. I think we need to be aware of the inconsistencies that exist, different levels of stipends administered by different people. How does that work? How does that interact on our PhD students? So I'm very happy to engage with you later on in the week on that. And I know we'll have an Oireachtas committee again tomorrow evening as well. In relation to the broader issue of student accommodation, I'll have more time on later questions. But I mean, I think there's two issues, affordability and supply. I think this question very much relates to the issue of affordability. We did take a number of measures in the budget in relation to reducing fees, improving grants, a bonus student grant payment. This is another measure, though, that we're taking this evening, which I accept you're welcoming and welcome you're welcoming, which will provide access to the tax relief on rent for students and their parents, and I think that also helps with affordability.